We're going to talk about abandonment tonight. Let's first talk about a couple of essential oils that you can use if you do know that abandonment, and we'll talk about what abandonment is. How can you see if that's one of your things that you deal with? But before I do that, I want you to know what oils that you can use, because I said that I would tell you what oils you can use to help you through all of these emotions, right? So if you are somebody who fears being abandoned, which is quite a bit of us, you would want to use frankincense, and I'll tell you why in a second. Well, I'll just tell you now. Frankincense is I'll just say them. Frankincense, myrrh, marjoram are the three oils that I suggest that you can use for abandonment. You don't have to use them all. You can use them all together. You can make a roller bottle and do like 10 drops each, which is 30 drops total in a roller bottle, fill it up with fractionated coconut oil, and use it 3 times a day. It's kind of how I would do it. I'm one of those people who I just like to attack it with all the force that I can. So I would do all 3 of those oils. But if you don't want to do that, or you don't have all 3 of the oils, you can use frankincense, myrrh, or marjoram. Frankincense it's the oil of truth, but in the essential oil world, frankincense is also the father. So there's some father connection with frankincense. Frankincense is one of my all-time favorite oils, so if you're going to use any of the oils, I suggest that you use frankincense. Frankincense is also your connection to God. Remember, God is your father. It's your heavenly father. You have an earthly father, and then you have a heavenly father. So God is your heavenly father. So frankincense makes sense that if you're healing abandonment, we'll talk about in a second what abandonment is, but you need to heal the relationship of the father. Myrrh is the oil for the mother, so that's how you can heal the relationship for the mother. And then marjoram is an oil of connection. So the fear of abandonment is the fear of losing the connection. So let's talk a little bit though about, so that's why those oils would work really well. Also, marjoram oil is really good for muscles. So anybody who works out, and if you get like stiff muscles from working out or anything like that, you can actually use marjoram. Is a great oil. A lot of people use it to support let me see how to say it the best way I can. Let me see. There's some people who sleep at night and their legs kind of I can't say what it is because I can't put those two together because I can't make claims. So let me see how I can. You sleep at night, and when you're doing that, your legs kind of get like uncomfortable. They get really uncomfortable, and you can't sleep very well because your legs are just like, I want to say that maybe they spasm or tighten or something like that. You can actually use marjoram oil on the muscles to help you get support a better night's sleep. Man, that was difficult for me to try to say without actually saying it. So hopefully you got that. Okay, so let's talk about what abandonment is. And I'm kind of not sure how much of my personal experience I will share tonight of abandonment, but if I have to, then I will. Otherwise, I think I'll just kind of keep it because it's such a big part of my life that we'll see. Okay, let's just see where we go from here. I'll just do whatever God tells me to do is how I live my life. So we'll see what happens. What is abandonment? Let's start there. Abandonment can be physical. It's like being left alone, being left behind, deserted. This type of abandonment is often seen in childhood, and we're going to talk a lot more about this in a second, but I just want to give you an overview. It can be physical or it can be emotional. Emotional abandonment is the feeling of being given up on, maybe somebody withdrawing from you emotionally. It can be a child who feels very alone. If you are a child in a narcissistic relationship, then you have the different roles that a narcissist assigns to the children. One is the golden child, one is the scapegoat, and one is there's two. I can't remember what the third one is, but it's like the child who like makes everything look wonderful, although that it's not. And then you also have it's like the loner child, the child who's forgotten. It's called the forgotten child. So you have that as well. A lot of times, the emotional abandonment will show up with the forgotten child. Actually, it shows up with all children in that situation, but that's a good way for me to explain what emotional abandonment is. But it's the feeling of being left out or left behind, not in a physical form, it's emotional form. And we'll talk about how that manifests in your relationships and your adulthood as well, the physical and the emotional abandonment, and what happens to someone who has lived that kind of life. So all in all, abandonment is the feeling of rejection. And I don't know anybody who lives on this planet that has not felt a rejection before. We've all felt rejection in some way, shape, or form. If it was in your family situation, then it was. If not, then it may have been in school with friends or something like that. And so a lot of times the abandonment is where the fear of missing out comes from. So there's some people who really struggle with thinking that they're going to miss out on everything. And it generally stems from the issue of abandonment. So people with abandonment issues, they experience many problems in relationships because they fear that the other person will leave them. So this fear is so strong that it will sabotage relationships. We're going to talk about how to work with somebody who feels like, who has the issue of abandonment, that you may have realized that you're playing out with them, how to make them feel safe and how to move them through this emotion. Now, it's not all going to be your responsibility to do that. The person has to heal on their own. The person has to be able to look at their pain and be able to even know that they have it, be able to express it to people that this is my thing, and recognize when it's being triggered so that everybody involved can be very compassionate and understanding of the situation. Hopefully you're around people that are healthy enough that they don't, how do I want to say it? Hopefully you're in a relationship that I don't want to say trigger it, that makes it like bigger. You know what I mean? Hopefully you're in a loving relationship where people understand and then they can walk you through that. If you're in a relationship where that person doesn't understand and they don't care, well, that's a relationship you need to that's a relationship problem then. Then maybe you need to look at maybe not having that relationship because it's not working for you. Okay, let's go on. So let's talk about the signs and symptoms of an abandonment issue that adults can have. Like if you're not really sure if abandonment is your thing, like you kind of maybe thought that it might be, or you have some instances in your life where you kind of thought maybe that might be an issue of mine. Well, let me explain. So a person who has an abandonment issue is going to generally be a people pleaser. And this isn't always the case because you always have both ends of the spectrum. You have the people pleaser and then you have the person who doesn't want to have to deal with anyone. So, but we'll just remember that there's two opposite, and then there's going to be in the middle people who share all of these qualities. So you might be somebody that goes, oh, I got all of those. Like sometimes I'm here and sometimes I'm there. And then you're going to have some people who are like way over here and people who are way over here. So people pleasers, like always wanting to please everybody, others. And these people give way too much in relationships. They have the inability to trust other people. People with an abandonment issue will push others away to avoid rejection. So that's this person over here who just pushes every single person away. It's really interesting. When I went into the military, I will give you an example. When I went into the military, I had a roommate. We shared a room together and we were pretty good friends. And I remember one time we got in a fight and I was so quick to drop her as a friend. And I was like, I would rather hurt you than have you hurt me with you leaving me. And I think it was like she wanted to hang out with like guys at the time, and I wasn't into that at the moment because I wanted to get the best score so I could go to I could pick the best duty station. I didn't want to get stuck with a crap duty station. So I was like, I'm going to study. I'm staying home to study. And she's like, I'm going to go hang out with some guy. And I felt abandoned. I was like, I felt like I thought we were going to study together, you know what I mean? Or whatever it was that I took offense to it. And I was upset. And I was like, I was so mean I was so mean to her, but it was interesting because she like slapped me in the face with her words and really made me think, stop and think. Like she said, you just don't throw friends away like that. I was like, what? She's like, that is not how you treat a friend. And she's like, you're my friend. And I was like, whoa, whoa. And I always respected that of her, that she put me in my place. She's like, you're not just going to throw me away. But at the time, I mean, my abandonment issue was so big. I was like, you're gonna leave me, so I'm going to push you away so you don't leave me first. You know, and I'm glad I didn't, because we stayed friends and everything was great, happily ever after. Anyway, so it's feeling insecure in a romantic partnership, friendships. It creates codependency and a need for continual reassurance that others love you and that will stay with you. Which is one of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute. If you're going to support someone through abandonment, I can just say it now, is that you need to let them know you're not going anywhere. They need to hear it from your voice, and they got to see it in your actions. People who have abandonment issues have trust issues, so trust and abandonment go closely together. And I almost did them together, but they're two big issues. There's no way I could have talked about them in the same night. I would have been hoarse. I'd have been tired. So you got to understand that these people don't trust life. They feel like everything has left them at one point or another. And I remember when I was a teenager, I kind of just felt like everything leaves anyway. You know, it's like my sister got shot and killed and died, and that was hard, and killed himself, and that was hard. And I just felt like I can just go through my life experience on all the abandonment issues that I had. And it was like, I was like, is it Vegas? I was like, what? I was like, is this life? Like, people just leave whenever? I was like, dude, I had a really tough time with it. But anyway, people who have abandonment issues, they need to control others. So control is something that's an issue. We're going to talk about that too. But for right now, let's just stick with abandonment. But persisting. So then also people who have abandonment issues have consistent unhealthy relationships. Every relationship that they have. And then it's also the inability to maintain relationships. That's true too. Like, I was so quick to cut people off. And I mean, so many times when I first got married too, I was packed my stuff up many times. I just had it packed. I was ready. Like, I was like, whenever this relationship is over, you know, it's like, I got my stuff. I'm ready to go. And my husband was like, what? You're crazy. He's like, you pack your stuff all the time. I do, and then I come to my senses, and I'm like, you know what I mean? Or he talks to me into it, or whatever. I don't know what the deal was, but who knows? I was always packing my stuff. Anyway, they quickly move from one relationship to another. They sabotage every single relationship. They have a lack of emotional intimacy, like they have trouble getting close in an intimate way. Doesn't mean that they can't be sexual. Of course they can, but not in an intimate way. So, and that's very interesting, because you can do one without having the other. It's just not as fun. Like, you need to have both, right, for it to really be what you're looking for. All right. So, abandonment issues are also a form of anxiety. It occurs when the individual has a strong fear of losing a loved one. It usually starts in childhood, but can begin in adulthood as well. Depends on what your life experience is. And people with abandonment issues often struggle in relationships. They have, like we talked about before, codependency, inability to develop trust within a relationship, which is huge, because you can't open up at all if you don't trust. You don't have trust in your relationship. You're going to hold back way too much. You're not going to have the fullness of a relationship without having the trust. And then there's people who do not have intimate relationships because they don't trust enough to even get to that point. And then we talked about how they sabotage relationships. So it's kind of just the same thing as I was talking about. So how do we play these issues out, the issue of abandonment, out in life? Well, I think this is where I'll probably give you some of my examples. We'll see how far I want to go we'll see what I want to early uncover. But the first time we play out abandonment in life is when we're born. When we're born into the world, we feel very separated from God and heaven once we're here on earth. And that's the first abandonment. So I guess you can say every single person who's watching this video has some sort of an abandonment issue, even if you had the perfect childhood. And some people will ask me, does everybody have to heal their inner child? I mean, what if I had a perfect childhood? And the answer is yes. And that's because even if you had a perfect childhood where you didn't have abuse and you didn't have abandonment, you know, your parents stayed together and your family wasn't abusive and they weren't toxic, they're really loving and they're awesome, which is, I want to say that's pretty rare. So if you had that, congratulations. One of the things I do want to say is people have told me, like, thank you so much for talking about your abuse. I haven't told everybody everything. Who knows if I'll come out and actually say everything. It's kind of something that has just been creeping out little by little. I've been doing healing work since 2017, and it's just taken me till today to actually be telling anyone about it. Nobody knew about it at all when I was growing up, not even the people closest to me. I only want to say the person who did know about it was the one who was going through it with me, which is my sister. So people have said, thank you so much because you're making me feel normal. Yeah, because abuse is something that people don't talk about. And people look at me and probably can't even believe. And if you knew what I went through, you wouldn't believe, like, at all. I had a hard time even believing it, even though I knew it was true. I have a hard time even seeing it for what it was, seeing the truth, because I didn't want to see it either. And it's the whole reason why I got amnesia when I left to go in the military. I couldn't even remember street names. I'd come home, I didn't remember anything until it finally comes up in my experience again, and I go, oh my gosh, yes, I remember that. That's wild. So I hope that I'm making it to where you know someone who lived through some stuff that was very difficult and very hard, but they're focused on healing, and that way you can see that someone can do it. Someone is being vulnerable with you to share their experience, and maybe you can have some type of a journey with me in some way, shape, or form. I hope that I'm making it feel like, you know, it did happen to a lot of kids in the 80s and 90s. Okay, abandonment, we play out these issues when someone is not physically there for you. It could be neglect. They could be not there for you in a physical way, or I should say physical and emotional, because neglect can be emotional as well. Like, you may have parents in your home, but they give you no attention at all. And that is neglect, right? And maybe you didn't receive their attention, their time, their love, something like that. So like So let me put it this way. My real dad was never in the picture, really. Pretty much. Like, my relationship with my real dad was, he divorced my mom. He had other kids. So he wasn't really interested in being a father. And he was a party guy and a gambler, and he was like, I don't know, played drums for a band or something. I'm not really even sure. I don't know a lot about my real dad, to be honest. And he would come in and out of my life sporadically. I mean, very, very sporadically. And I never stayed at his house or anything like that. I can remember specific instances, like one time where I went to see he drove me. I mean, it's like, it was so very far and few between. He just wasn't into having kids. So that's my first abandonment, is my father. He was never there. And I remember looking at other kids that had fathers that were their fathers, like not a stepfather, but a real father, like not a birth father. Okay. And I remember being like, why didn't my dad want to stay with my mom so that I could have both parents? I mean, I really struggled with that as a child. And then I found out about 12 years old that my father didn't want to pay child support, so he told the courts I wasn't his child. I was the only kid that he did that with. He didn't do that with any of the other kids. Like, he paid child support for them. I didn't never even pay child support, let's be honest. But, you know, he didn't. And so it's written in the court documents that he thought I wasn't his child. So that was really difficult for a kid to know. And then I would see my stepdad, who had a really great relationship with his daughter, so I thought. Not as much as he wanted, because there were other issues in my house. So he couldn't have the relationship that he really wanted with her. But what he did give her, I saw that it was my abandonment issue. I was looking through the glasses of my abandonment issue. Like, wow, how come my dad doesn't want me like that? And it was very difficult for a child to see that. On the other hand, my mom played out physical and emotional abuse with me. So I was the only child, except for when my sister would come over, then she would get it as well. And so there was abandonment there, because I would see how my mom would treat my other siblings and not treat me the same way. And so it was abandonment, emotional abandonment, physical abandonment. Some of that abandonment was where she would pretend like she was going to lead me places, because she liked to play those kind of games with me. So she would take me somewhere and pretend like she was going to lead me. And she liked that game. That was one of the games she would play. We'll talk about, I don't even know if I'm ever going to come on and really talk about abuse, but I might. It's just kind of a difficult thing for me to talk about, but we'll see. So that abandonment, right? And then my sister, my older sister, she had a problem with me. So we never really built a good relationship together. So I felt abandoned by my older sister. And I don't know I never knew as a child why she hated me so much, but she did. So we had abandonment issues. And so then I had my other sister, or my brother, I got a crazy family. I have a brother and sister that are older, and they just were never really in my life. And when I did go see them, it's like I felt like I wasn't that important for them. They were really into my other sister, my oldest sister. So it was just kind of like I had abandonment everywhere. Like, I just felt emotionally abandoned, physically abandoned in a lot of places. An example, my real dad would say, hey, I'm going to come pick you guys up. And my sister and I, so she has, my other sister, so my dad would say, hey, my real dad, I'm going to pick you up. So we'd pack our bags. And I remember waiting for him, like just waiting all day long, waiting by the window, watching cars go by, watching car go by, watching car go by. And he never came. He would do it quite a bit. Like, he'd be like, I'm going to come pick you guys up and we're going to go do this. And we get all excited and we pack our bags, and he never came. It was like, so it was hard. It was difficult to know that he just wasn't ever there. And then my mom had her own issues, so she was never really there either. And then each of my siblings. And then I had a really good relationship with my stepsister. She was amazing. We had a really great relationship. But then, she had a lot of hard stuff in her life as well. On both sides of the family, her mom's side, and then when she'd come over to our house, same thing. She had a lot. She had a lot of stuff going on. So she, about, I don't know, I want to say 12 or 13. I don't remember when it was, but it was pretty early on when she started drugs and drinking, and I felt, and at that point, it was like that took her. She went away, and she was in that life, and I wasn't at that point either. So it was like really difficult, because then that was my one rock, and then she was gone. And then it was like, of course, I talked about, but then my sister got kicked out of the house because of the drugs and the drinking and whatever, and the abuse. It was pretty much, she got kicked out because, and so she left, and I didn't talk to her for a long time. And that was really hard, because she was the one I related to. She was my emotional rock. And then, so she's gone. And then I didn't even talk about my stepdad. He wasn't allowed to show me love. He wasn't allowed to show me praise. And so I felt abandoned by him. So it was like every single person that was in my life, I felt abandoned by. So what happened? I took that with me when I went in the military, and I just assumed that my husband would abandon me. I kind of just figured he would. I just kind of was waiting for the day that he was going to leave too. Either he was going to die or he was going to just up and leave me. I don't know. I just kind of coasted through life for a while thinking that any day now, any day, because I've seen it my whole life. Like, why is this going to be any different? So what I did is I created the abandonment between him and me, emotional abandonment. I made it to where I trained him to abandon me emotionally. So even though we were together for many, many years, before I realized what I was doing, is I would create energetic abandonment between us and then try to blame him for it. Yeah, okay. Now, I'm not saying he doesn't have his own abandonment, but I'm kind of just saying that that's like my abandonment issue. It was huge. It was huge. So when I finally got to abandonment and releasing my trapped emotions, that's the only reason why I could talk about it today, because I did that. So that kind of just gives you an example of how the different ways that we can play out abandonment. And I'm a master. Like, I should have my doctorate in abandonment, I swear. Like, I'm really, so, yeah, very, very interesting how that all worked out. But a child can feel abandoned if a parent leaves them for an extended amount of time. And these are the latchkey kids. I don't know if you know what that is, but a latchkey kid is a kid who both parents work. And so when they get home, they have a key around their neck. They're called latchkey kids, and they let themselves in. And I knew a lot of kids in the 80s that, or 80s and 90s, whatever, when I was growing up, that were latchkey kids. And I'd be like, are you, and I was a latchkey kid at different points in my life, not the whole time, but yeah, there was a time when I was a latchkey kid as well. And I remember being locked out. Like, if you lose your key, I was locked out for hours. You know what I mean? Ain't nobody. That's probably why I got to be such a great singer and good at making up songs. I'd be sitting out in my front door like forever waiting for someone to come home, right? But latchkey kids those would be the kids that would be like, hey, yeah, I got to go inside and I can't come home, or I can't come out to play until my parents come home. And sometimes that would be, they would never go out to play because by the time their parents come home, it'd be dark at night. So there was no way they could go out and play. Anyway, another way that we like to play out abandonment in our life is death of a loved one. Also creates feelings of abandonment. Divorce can be very devastating for a child or children that do not understand why did you guys separate? And it was one of the things when I met my husband and when we had children, we were like, we don't want to be those parents that. Now, I understand that sometimes people have to get divorced because they're in a toxic relationship. And I'm saying, yeah, for sure. But if it's not toxic, then, I don't know. I mean, just kind of, I don't know. I think that people need to be happy too. So it's like, I kind of go back and forth. I think that's something that is an individual basis. But toxicity, definitely, you don't want to stay in that because there's no growth in that. You got to have healing in order to have growth. So I don't know. I'd really kind of take a look at that. And I don't know everything. I'm just giving you my perception. That's it. So whenever you feel, it's abandonment, how we play it out in life is whenever you feel loss of someone in your life that you care about. I talked about death. I talked about drugs abandoning me. I talked about abuse. I talked about emotional abandonment, whatever. It's just whenever you feel a loss of someone in your life is abandonment. And it doesn't always have to be death. And it's just whenever you open your heart to someone in life and you include that person, that once there's an absence of them, their absence, it creates pain. So another way we create abandonment in our life, so if you're not anybody who had any of those things, you might play out abandonment if you lose your job. You may feel betrayed or abandoned by the company or the people that you trusted. And it feels like, when you feel abandonment, it feels like something has been taken away from you. So if you have, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a job. It doesn't have to be a death. It just has to be someone not being there when you feel like they need to, when you feel like they should be there for you. So those are the feelings that we need to work through. Oh, I was talking about childhood stuff. I'm so sorry. I got lost for a second. So people ask me, do I still have to work on my childhood if I had a perfect childhood? Like I had a great childhood. Yeah, you do. You still have inner child work because you still have issues that you played out with people. So whether or not you played them out with your family, you might have played them out with people at school, your teachers, something like that. And they may be small, and you may not have all of the issues. You may just, judgment may just be your issue. So you may have had a perfect family, but let's say your family put you on a pedestal and they're like, oh my gosh, they're so amazing. Then that child can end up having fear of failure. So there is always some sort of thing that the child inside of you didn't know how to deal with the emotions. So you do need to go back and take a look at the belief systems that the child created. And so no child is exempt because we all had childlike mindset. We were children, and you look at your children and you do your best to kind of guide them, but they're still going to have their own belief systems. They're still going to have their own issues. It's best if you go through and deal with yours and heal yours so that you can turn around and help your children as they go through their own healing. So it's all about growth in the end, all of it. It's all about growing and learning. It's all about just learning something. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit what happens in your psyche when you feel abandoned, because this is really important to understand the psyche of a person who has an abandonment issue. Because if you live with a person who has a strong abandonment issue, you need to know what's going on in their mind. If you're that person, you need to know what's going on in your mind. Okay, that there's something wrong with you. You had experiences that created abandonment feelings inside of you, and you react a certain way, and you act a certain way, right? And I gave you many, many different examples of how abandonment showed up in my life. And so a child who feels abandoned or perceives abandonment, because you could be, like I said, the perfect parent, and the child, you may have told your child one too many times, go play, go play, go play. And then that might, and you're not like abusive or anything or toxic, you just want some space, you know what I mean? But it still could create somewhat of an abandonment issue. It's not going to be as bad as an abusive abandonment state, right? Or trauma abandonment state. But I mean, it could be, fear of someone not being around, right? And every child has a fear of their parents dying. Every child has that fear. I remember waking up and crying because I thought my parents, even though I had the life that I had, I definitely wouldn't want to have lost one of them when I was growing up, because it's like, what would happen? It's a scary thing for a child. What would happen? I'd rather have been in the existence that I was in than to be passed around in foster homes, because that is scary. I've seen what happens. I've taught children who are in foster homes, and they've told me their experiences. And I know the foster care, a lot of times there's really good people in there, because some of my students work in foster care now, and they're trying to take care of kids. So I know there's good people in there, but things can happen because the system's a little flawed. All right, so children, when they feel abandoned, they often feel responsible, and they believe that they did something wrong. This is the core belief of a child who feels abandoned. I felt like I should have never been born. There were several reasons why I thought that, but that was kind of how I internalized it. Like, why am I even here? And I always believed that I did something wrong, and I didn't want to be a bad child, and I couldn't figure out why I was a bad child. But that there's more to that part of the story. But one of the reasons could be this: like, I felt that abandonment, thought that I had done something, that I'm the one who caused the problem because I was born. And then that internalization, then you feel like you don't deserve to be loved at all. And that's a really scary place to be and sad place to be. But picture for a moment, let me give you a picture for a second. Let's picture for a moment a 4-year-old child who playfully climbs up a tree. And when she gets up there, she becomes very scared and frightened, calling out for her father to help her. And the father thinks, well, if she got up there, she should be able to get down on her own. And so he says, this is a great time for me to teach independence and teach self-assurance to a 4-year-old child. And so he refuses to help her with words that sound something like, you got up there by yourself, so get down by yourself. And that experience right there can trap emotions inside of the body. So very interesting what I've learned through trapped emotions and releasing them, and I've helped people release them, is those emotions actually hide inside your organs and your muscles and things. And it's like, you may have heard that before, but it's crazy. It's like the gallbladder is one that a lot of people like to keep their emotions in for some reason. When they trap it, they'll just kind of put it in their gallbladder. The book explains it. It's pretty cool. And then you think about it, well, why do people, when they're older, have such gallbladder issues? A lot of people have to get their gallbladders taken out. And when you take out the gallbladder, it's not like the emotions go away. The energy is still there. So it's like it's still in your body. You still have to get rid of it. It's very, very, very interesting. But what'll happen is that experience right there can trap an emotion for the child. Because the child is standing there at the top of the tree with tears of terror and sadness. The child will perceive that the father doesn't care about her safety, right? So it's going to say, well, let's store away that abandonment issue somewhere in the body until you can safely take care of that issue. But looking at it at the adult perspective, so let's just say that this child had, like, the dad wasn't abusive, he wasn't toxic, he wasn't narcissistic, he wasn't any of those things. Let's just pretend like it was a perfect childhood. Mom and dad were still together. You know, this is just a 4-year-old child, and dad believes logically, like, this is we should teach this little girl to get down on her own. She'll be self-sufficient. Okay. So the logical adult perspective is that you can see how the father may have felt that he was helping the child to become more independent. And he was doing the best he could to provide his definition of love. Okay? That's his definition of love. His definition of love logically was teaching. That's a logical person. Teach. I teach means I love you. Guidance means I love you. That's a logical person. That's me right here. I'm logical. I'm teaching. Teaching means I love you here on Facebook enough to spend my time with you talking about abandonment. But yet the child needed attention and affection in a different way to feel loved. And she attempted to get her father's attention, and his denial of her attention was not about his lack of love, as he logically felt he was teaching her a lesson. But something as simple as this can cause a pattern within the child of abandonment. And then the child can go on to adulthood and choose a partner to play abandonment issues out with. So the father's lack of knowledge about his child's needs is not unusual. It's a very normal thing. That's why every person needs to go back and deal with their childhood issues. Not just people like me who had severe issues, but everybody does. Because we talked about before, there are 2 different personality types, and they demonstrate love in a different way. And this is what I would call accidental abandonment. Abusive abandonment, like we said, is a completely different story. And that is connected more to the issue of control and abuse, which we'll dive into maybe a bit later. We'll see how long I want to continue. I'm doing this based on intuition. So if I feel like I need to continue these classes, if people keep coming back to me and saying, hey, I really like these classes, they're giving me a wealth of knowledge that I didn't have before, it really is helping guiding me in a different way, then great, I'll come back on and do it. If not, I mean, I could be spending this time in a different way. So I choose to do this because my logical mind says I teach means I love. Okay? So, all right. So when you're in a relationship with someone who's become more self-focused because maybe they're healing, and if you're not healing, you might feel neglected. Or maybe they're feeling self-focused because they are introverted and they just don't respond, like they don't need to be around people all the time. Then the other person can feel really neglected, and it could trigger their abandonment issue. So it's the feeling ignored. Okay, with this feeling of being ignored, then what you do is use that perception to distance yourself from that person. because it confirmed your abandonment issue, and you have doubted your importance, to the importance for you to have needs and wants. So normally this happens, when this happens, what you'll see is the other person will play out the abandonment. So let's say you have a person that doesn't even know they're playing out the abandonment issue. Like you have a partner, and that person is more introverted, and they are going into a state of introversion. And maybe that looks like listening to headphones and playing like a game on their phone or something. And you are more emotional, and then you're looking at them like, oh, they're abandoning me. They don't love me. And then the other person has no idea. They just have headphones in. Like, they don't even know they're part of your like issue. And then what ends up happening, and I know this because I speak from experience, right? Because I created this space and this abandonment in my own relationship. So I totally get what I'm talking about. I see it in a different way now, but there was a point in my life when I didn't see it that way. And I would see it as, oh my gosh, that person is abandoning me. So for instance, my husband likes to write music. So he would be in his studio for hours writing music. And I didn't really want to write at that time. And I'd be like, oh, he doesn't want to like hang out. Like he doesn't want to watch movies. He doesn't want to, I was like, oh, he must not love me anymore. I'm surprised I didn't go pack my bags. I'm just kidding. But what I did is in my mind, I think, oh, well, I mean, it's normal. I mean, everybody leaves me. So why wouldn't he be any different? He's just already left me emotionally or whatever I'm thinking in my mind. He has no idea that I'm even playing this issue out with him. Crazy making, right? Anyway, so then what would happen is the person who feels abandoned, they will start to create distance between themselves and the person that they believe is closing off love to them. And then that just validates their abandonment issue. So they go on believing that the world is not safe to let anyone in. They close everyone out because they subconsciously think that everybody leaves, right? And this is something that can happen very slowly after the honeymoon period. The honeymoon period, people don't realize what the honeymoon period is. When you first meet someone and you're connecting with somebody in the honeymoon period, it's actually like your soul selves. There's no judgment. There's nothing. It's like, I guess I would say it as it's your God self meeting the other person's God self. There's no barriers. So you're like, how come we can't get our relationship back to that honeymoon period? You can. You just have to realize, you have to get into that soul self space again. You can't have judgment, abandonment, trust, control, and all of these things because it wasn't when you met that person in the honeymoon period. You wanted to show them your best self. So what do? You leave everything, all that crap behind, and then you think, oh my gosh, this person made me so happy. No, silly, you made yourself happy because you left all of that behind and you said, I'm going to live in this different space. Right? And then what happens is we slowly, as we're living with that person, our crap kind of just comes back. And we start to play issues out with that person. So before you know it, you're not even touching anymore. You're not kissing anymore. You're not intimate anymore emotionally. Sometimes it even separates people even on a sexual level where they're not even connecting in that way anymore. And they're just wake up one day and they're like, we're roommates. And it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. You can get back to the honeymoon period, but you have to agree that you're going to work on your issues. You're going to have to agree that that's not going to be part of your life experience anymore. I mean, there's got to be a point when you decide that you're going to do that. There's got to be a point when you decide that I have carried these my whole life. I'm not going to continue to carry this anymore. I'm not going to allow abandonment to be my issue anymore. I will do whatever it takes not to have abandonment be my issue anymore. Not only do you abandon not only do you create so much space from other people that you have literally, it's like, I picture like a moat around you. Like people can't cross that. You know what I mean? There's no bridge. I got a moat, you can't come over here. I'm tired of being hurt, right? But, so what happens is not only are you creating abandonment between you and other people, what you end up doing too is then abandoning yourself. You abandon yourself when you ignore your past. When you say, oh my gosh, that was so horrific, I can't look at that anymore. You're abandoning who you are. You're abandoning all of that. And I tried to do that. I tried to leave and say, that's not going to be me anymore. I'm going to live this other life. And it doesn't happen that way. It just creates anger within yourself because you're not dealing with what you have to deal with what you need to deal with. And it actually can create narcissism. That's what creates narcissism. People wonder what narcissism is. And I really believe that that's you abandoning your own healing yourself. When you abandon yourself, then you start to put everybody else's needs above your own. This action will demonstrate that you feel that you're not important and that it's acceptable for other people to walk all over your needs. This level of selfishness, I should say it in this way. There is a level of selfishness that is healthy, and we're taught not to be selfish. Yet selfishness is actually self-love. And people are like, oh, yeah, but, people really look at like selfishness as being a bad thing, and it's just not. When we say, oh, that person's selfish, I mean, you're passing judgment on them, but really in reality, we're all taught not to love ourselves. It's like when I worked in the emergency room, one of the things that was like the standard was that you don't take a lunch. So I'm here to work 12 hours in the emergency room. I'm here to watch people die and do CPR on them. I'm here to see the most horrific things that you can see on the daily. And you don't want me to take a 30-minute lunch break. Like the way that was is that they were like, you would see nurses standing at the nurse station eating really fast, really quickly. I mean, it was like the standard. It was like the social thing about being in the ER. Don't even think about taking a lunch break. And I'm like, whatever happened to like the 15s after 4 hours? Like, where's my 15-minute break? No, you got a 30-minute lunch break, if at that. So anyway. Because if somebody took a lunch break being a nurse, man, you look selfish. I think you should be selfish and go take your lunch break. You got to take care of yourself. We're taught not to love ourselves. But there is a level of selfishness that, as long as you're not bulldozing over other people's needs all the time, then, but there is a level of selfishness to say that to create boundaries. You got to have some selfishness. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, abandonment is represented as a lack or absence of something in your life. So this can be a lack of money, a lack of help, a lack of love, a lack of friendship, a lack of acceptance, a lack of respect. It's any time that we sense emptiness within us and we experience that feeling of abandonment in some form. I also want to say that sometimes people will hear of someone else doing really, really well. And it's not that they're jealous, it's that they feel abandoned by God. Like, how come so-and-so is doing so well and I'm not? Do you abandon me, God? Especially if you have an abandonment issue, you might feel that way. You must be abandoning me and not giving me what I want because I don't deserve it, because I'm not worthy of it. And that can create lots of anger inside of a person. And then they project it onto the person who's doing well as if it's their fault. They're not, I don't think everybody is jealous. I think a lot of people have like abandonment issues and feel like God forsake them in some way because someone else is doing well and they're not. And I should be doing well at the same time as that person or before them. But when is my time, God? Or you're just never going to give it to me because you abandoned me, right? It's very interesting. All right, so the beliefs that are created by abandonment play out in many areas of your life. In many situations, it's the feeling that people are abandoning you or betraying you. So I'll give you an instance. You might hear that some people are going out for the night and they didn't invite you. You feel abandoned. They probably just didn't even think about it, but now your abandonment issue is like really being triggered. And it's lit up, when actually you're the one who created the pattern of abandonment, they had nothing to do with it. They're just decided that they were going to go out. They may have completely forgot to invite you, or maybe they just didn't want to invite so many people. I mean, there's so many different reasons. And then what do? We sabotage our relationships when that abandonment is triggered, because what do? You call them on the phone. Why didn't you guys invite me? Now I'm pissed. You know what I mean? It's like, and then you sabotage the relationship at that point. Because what's happening is that you are remembering the pain that was felt in childhood. It's like that 4-year-old girl remembering that her father didn't get her down from the tree, and she cried her way down the tree, and it was so horrible for her. She thought she was going to die, right? That's abandonment. And abandonment feels like you're going to die. It does. It feels like, when my dad didn't pick me up that day, it's kind of like, I felt like, I don't know. I can't even explain it, but let me move on. And in order to protect ourselves from that pain and the feeling of abandonment, betrayal, or disappointment of other people's actions, you know what we do? We push people away. It's just easier to do that. It's easier just like not even, and then that often isolates ourselves even more, right? And it's just a continuation of fear felt in childhood, that we cannot depend on others people to meet our needs. So why try? It's kind of what I felt. Right? And I was like, I'm going to abandon you before you abandon me, because I have seen everybody do it to me in my life. So peace out. Right? That's how I was. Okay. I've worked on that. Thank God. All right. So let's see. How do you guide yourself through healing? This is always a great question. There are many different ways to release emotions. Somebody asked me that the other day. I've done many different ways. And God will give you the tools as you grow. God will give you the tools that you need in order to help yourself. But the inner child is one of the keys to healing the emotional disconnect in your life. It is because it's the child that we need to heal before the adult can make changes in their life. Whether you believe in that or not, those experiences in childhood were so important, and they were so not understood by your child self. They were very misunderstood. You just didn't have the emotional capacity or the background knowledge to support yourself through that. So, and in actuality, it's like you wouldn't be the person today if you didn't go through those things. And maybe you don't care. Maybe you don't love yourself enough to say how important it is to be the person that you are today and to have those experiences. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but let me just say that even though you're no longer the child, you function with the emotional filter of the childhood experience. That's why it's important for you to go back and heal the child. How many times have you fought with someone and you're like, oh my gosh, they're throwing a temper tantrum like a 5-year-old? Because they are. Because even though they're in a 40-year-old adult body, they are acting like a 5-year-old child. So yeah, they're looking at life through a 5-year-old child's filter. So the energy of the emotions that child experienced are a very important part of who you are today. And those emotional memories unconsciously continue to affect your relationships and your reactions when you encounter a similar experience or a personality type. It's called a trigger. The child has the belief systems that align with the child's perspective and the emotional memories. I don't know any child that has the complete understanding of an adult that could make belief systems that that can make belief systems that don't need to be fixed or don't need to be healed or don't need to be looked at. I mean, you just don't have the emotional maturity. I don't know any child that has that much emotional maturity. I'm sorry, I don't. So the belief systems are so integrated in the adult actions and reactions that we often are unable to identify the real problem. A lot of times you will have a reaction and go, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Why did I behave that way? And then you hate yourself. And you replay it over and over and over and over in your mind, and you just torture yourself over it. That's That's it. You need, instead of torturing yourself, go back and identify the real problem. What's the real thing? Who cares about the reaction? And who cares about how that person thought you acted? It doesn't really matter. Because if they're a healthy person, they're going to be like, you're dealing with stuff. And if they're not, well, maybe you need to get more healthy people instead. No. All right. We see things that are taking place at the moment and assume that that's the reason why we're acting the way that we are, when reality is that what is happening is just triggering the emotional response of an earlier injury. That's it. So let me give you an example. When my husband and I fight, we will stop, we will leave, and I will give him grace and say, that's probably has nothing to do with me. And more, I'm sure I did something, but I'm just saying, like, it does, for right now. It triggered something else that's even more bigger. And then he'll go look at his stuff, and I'll go look at my stuff and be like, what triggered that response? Because sometimes I'm in a fight and I know it doesn't have anything to do with him. And I will be, it's like I'm looking at myself as a third person and going like, why am I even trying to turn this around and defend myself in this way? And I'm in my mind, I'm thinking this as I'm blurting out stupid stuff, right? It's like, and I'm like, why am I doing that? Why am I saying that? So what I'll do is generally just stop talking, go away, look at it deeper, and then a lot of times we just forgive and just go, it was what it has nothing to do with you. And yeah, I'm not happy about that thing that happened, but the reality of it is I needed to deal with something else. Okay. So in other words, we often find a really angered, injured 5-year-old child who has taken over the emotional control of the adult body. So when I'm fighting with him, I realize that I'm probably like 6 or 7, and he's probably like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 5 or whatever, and we're fighting like that instead of adults. Because when you get in that emotional response, it's like the adult leaves and the child comes out, and it's crazy, right? Crazy making. All right, so the child has subconsciously been trying to change the relationship that they had with their mother and father by attracting the same type of person in that relationship. So hoping for a second chance, and instead they repeat the same outcomes because they haven't grown, they haven't healed, they haven't learned. So that's what we do in relationships. We choose people that we play out these issues. It's almost like after you fight with someone and then you leave the fight and you're like, oh my gosh, I should have said this and I should have said that and you kind of replay it in your mind. Well, that's what the child inside of you is doing. They're subconsciously trying to replay out this relationship with their mother and father because they didn't have the emotional capacity to deal with it at the time. So it's like they're just reliving this scenario over and over and over with different people, hoping to get a second chance to say or do the right thing that makes it better. But instead, the vibration is the same, so the outcome is the same. What we want to do is stop allowing the child to drive the adult bus anymore. Don't allow the child to do that anymore. And when the child comes out, just stop talking and remove yourself and come back with a more mature adult response, a way of looking at everything. Okay, so in healing, sometimes people become afraid of the person that they would be without the protective shield. The thought of changing some of that is really scary. So even if it's like for your highest good to change it, sometimes it's like, I got to take that armor away. Like that has helped me survive. We don't need to survive anymore. You're the adult. You don't need armor anymore. You're a grown man. You're a grown woman. You don't need that. This separation that you've created with others has become your comfort zone. And you're accustomed to what it feels like, even if it makes you unhappy. And you don't really feel loved because of it, because it's all you know. The fear of opening up and being vulnerable in a relationship can overcome the need to be loved, especially if there's self-worth issues. So that fear is so strong about being vulnerable that it's like, I would rather not be loved than have to be open and share myself with someone. That is just way too scary. All the child knows is what the child has experienced. And the child then grows up without feeling loved and has low self-worth. So in this instant, what happens is the adult is unable to ask for love or accept love from those who they have relationships with. And what a lot of times I will find people who are like, I can't seem to get love. And I'm like, well, you got such a shield up, nobody can even try to love you. You are not accepting love from anyone. And they're like, yeah, I am. No, you're not. I mean, you can energetically feel people's shields sometimes. And it's like, you know that there's no going to be any real connection with that person, because they have to open up and heal in order for that to take place. Okay, so how do you change the child perspective into the adult perspective? That's a good question. So if you're able to step back and look at your belief patterns, then you're able to see what changes you need to make within yourself. This is done in an attempt to heal the old. This is done in an attempt to heal the old damage. Start making better choices about how you react to people in the situations that you find yourself in. So don't allow yourself to respond in the way that you always have. I imagine it like it's a fork in the road. So every time I come to one of these experiences, and I've come to several of them, and sometimes now I just stop and I'm not reactive anymore. Because reactive hasn't gotten me anywhere. And I don't really want to be slapped in the face with words anymore from people. I will just do it myself, right? So it's like, I imagine it like if something were to come to me that made me feel really uncomfortable, or made me feel vulnerable, or made me feel scared, then I imagine it like a fork in the road. And I say to myself, I can take this route, which is the route I've always taken. And I can respond in the way that I always have. Or I can do something completely different. And this is scary, but I understand that this is where abundance is. I understand that this is where love is. And if I want to do that, I have to go in this direction. And that means that if somebody triggers my abandonment issue, my first intuition my first instinct would be, my first childhood reaction would be to abandon them first. Before you would abandon me, I'm going to abandon you first because it hurts way too bad. So I'm going to close myself off from anyone until one day you feel completely disconnected from the world. But anyway, so I can do that, or I can say, I'm going to go this way. And what does that look like? It's got to be something completely different than closing yourself. So the opposite of closing yourself off would be to open yourself up. Oh, geez, that's pretty scary. But I know that on the other side of that is abundance. I know on the other side of that is everything that I've ever wanted. If I keep going in this direction, I'll keep getting the same results. It's the definition of insanity. But I can do it if I want to. Or I can say, no, I'm going to go this other direction, and I'm going to have courage, and I'm going to go full force. I'm going to jump in the pool, right? And I'm going to do something different. That's the best way that I could, I may have to make a conscious choice to choose differently. And you need to recognize the opportunity too. So sometimes at the beginning, it's hard to recognize the opportunity because you just react. It's so ingrained in us just to react. You have to slow down, and you have to stop, and you have to look at every experience that comes to you with a magnifying glass, and be willing to recognize the opportunities, because they're not challenges, they're opportunities. And then you can have the ability to make the change. And once you make that change and realize it's not that scary, it's a lot easier to do it the next time, because you go, oh yeah, last time I made this change, and when I did that, it opened so many doors for me. It's so much abundance. I was like, oh my gosh, then I'm going to do it again. Because some people are like, well, why even heal? Because it just opens up opportunities and doors that are shut and closed because you closed them. And once you decide that you're going to do something different, they open again. So the key to finding an intense love of self. I should have said that differently. My notes just confused me for a second. Okay, the key is to find an intense love of self before trying to open your heart to others. Few of us are truly taught to love ourselves above and beyond anyone else. And like I said, people feel like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I should do that. But this type of love is very necessary for survival. It may seem selfish, where you're taught it is wrong to be self-centered. We're not talking about egotistical, not that word. That's not the word. Arrogant. There we go. I couldn't think what I was trying to hear. We weren't, we're not talking about arrogance. We're talking about loving yourself enough to say, this is what I want. I want it in this way. And at first it's a little tricky to ask for things when you feel like you're not deserving, but give yourself some time and you'll be able to do it. Because when you love yourself in that way, that is the key to allow others to love. Like, people are already loving you, but your heart isn't open, your door isn't open. It's kind of like, do you want to build a snowman? Right? It's like that. She's all, Elsa, and the door is like shut. That's what it's like. Like, you can't, and she's like singing in the door. She's like, hi, you don't want to come out and play? And that's what people who are trying to love you are doing. They're like knocking on your heart door, and your heart door is like, dude, this is chained. There's a lock on it. Like, this is totally chained, and you can't. It's glued. Like, it's glued. It's never coming apart. Right? It's that's right. That's what what's it called? It's soldered. Right? It's soldered shut. So and sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, well, being self-centered is narcissistic, and I don't want to be narcissistic. And let me tell you something. People who go, me loving myself, does that, am I being narcissistic? People who ask that question, am I narcissistic? You're not narcissistic, because narcissistic people don't ask that question of themselves. So don't worry about it. Just love yourself. Be you know what? Be narcissistic for a little bit now, but you don't have to. Narcissistic is super, like, there's other problems for that, like even borderline personality disorder and stuff for that, right? There's a lot that goes on with that. You are not narcissistic, so don't worry about that. Just love yourself. All right. Logical people are often better at putting themselves, their needs first, because they have the survival instinct. Remember, we talked about, like, in my situation, I'm actually emotional, so I love to connect with people emotionally. But to survive, I became really logical. So I could actually, because I'm both, I think that sometimes, in some aspects, I feel like it was a little bit, I won't say it was easier, no. I really struggled at self-love, so I don't know if I totally agree with what I wrote there. Anyway, emotional personality types have more compassion because they often meet the needs of others before their own, which completely depletes their energy, by the way. And then what happens with them is they often feel guilty. So a lot of times emotional people will feel guilty for asking to have their needs met. The manner in which you are showing love and respect for yourself will demonstrate on how others will treat you. If you are not protecting, nurturing, respecting yourself, then others will treat you in the same demeaning way. You may feel that you have overcome the challenges of your past relationships, but upon closer examination, you might actually find that each relationship that you experience involves the same issues. They're just demonstrated in a different way, but they're the same issues of abandonment. You just got to look at them. Sometimes The child inside doesn't understand that their parents did love them, but in their own way. So it's not in the way that the child was looking for love. So maybe the parent was more logical type of love and the child needed more physical attention, like being held or nurtured or felt loved. When the child grows up in this way, then they see themselves as a failure to all relationships, and it diminishes their self-worth. A logical personality type demonstrates support through instruction and guidance and money and support in that way, often believing that personal interaction isn't necessary. Where an emotional personality type nurtures, sometimes can nurture to the point of over-functioning for the child, which for a logical child, that can be an issue, because then they're not learning their logical needs of, where is it? It's right here. Logical is respect. When you're over-functioning for someone, you're not actually respecting them. You're not creating stability and security within them as well, because they feel like they don't know how to do anything themselves, right? Okay, so what's else? But an emotional person might neglect the needs of a logical personality type by just sharing too much like physical. So you have to really be cautious, or not, I'm sorry, just aware of what your child is. Are they logical? Are they emotional? I got 3 emotionals in my house, so sometimes it's a little tricky for me. It helps me explore my emotional side a lot more, which is really cool, because as survival, I really do kind of get stuck in my logical mind a lot. But I do like exploring my emotional side, so don't get me wrong. Let's see. So the best way to work with your perception is to stop the torture that you're creating in your relationships. What I would suggest is to abstain from any more relationships until you heal your own self-image, your self-worth, your self-esteem. If you do not have love and respect for yourself, how can you expect others to do that with you? In some relationships where you can't, I can't just abstain from a relationship. I'm already married. Luckily, we're both on that same kind of journey, so we're there for each other to give space, because what you need is space in order to uncover who you really are. You need to have that connection within yourself. You need to have the place to do it. And so my husband and I, we give each other a lot of space. It's not abandonment, so let me be clear. It's a lot of space. It used to be abandonment. Now it's space. So you may need to work with the inner child to release anger towards your parents for not giving you love that you needed, and gain the understanding that your parents provided love based on their own definition of love. Are they a logical person? Are they emotional? You need to figure out what they are. And now, I'm not talking about abusive parents here, because I know I got a lot of you guys on here who had abusive parents. I'm not talking about that. There is a level of allowing the inner child to be angry and to put the blame back where it belongs. I'm talking to people who kind of grew up in a more of a healthier household. Just figure out if your parents were logical or emotional, and that will give you a lot of insight on why you feel like you're not getting love in your relationships today. There are many ways for receiving love without judgment and without fear of being abandoned. You'll need to be able to create this new vision of what your life looks like, and we can do it. It's really important. The energy of the new moon is in 2 days. I mean, you can actually start now, because the energy, you start to feel it now, the energy of the new moon. And I like to use that energy. I believe God puts energy here on the planet for a reason. So, because this is the type of work, right? So, I would start, like I had said, on my Facebook page, go back to that and take a look at the questions that I had you answer. What do you want love to look like? What do you want your finances to look like? What do you want your space to look like? The people around you, those types of things. Because you need to be able to see what you want. And I had said this before in one of the videos, that somebody had asked me, what does love mean to me? And I couldn't even answer the question. I was so detached from who I really was. I was so detached from life that I was like, I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, what do you think it is? That's kind of like how I answered it. I was like, what, you tell me what it, I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about if you live with someone who has abandonment issues. And I'm just going to say that that's every one of us. So everybody should be listening up in some way, shape, or form, because it doesn't have to be as severe as my abandonment issues were or are, but everybody has some type of feeling of being abandoned and fear of abandonment. How can you help someone? Okay, so first, it can be very challenging to live with someone who has abandonment issues. You need to be super compassionate. I don't mean you need to overfunction or to let them get away with behaviors. You still want to hold them accountable for behaviors, and hopefully there's someone that can hear that you're doing that again. Well, I'll do that to my husband. He'll do it to me. You're doing that again. Is that the way you want to do this? Give them the opportunity to make the choice. Oh gosh, no, I don't want to do that. If you don't have a healthy relationship, if you say that to someone, they're going to go, F you. You know what I mean? But hopefully you're in a relationship where you have at least enough emotional intimacy to where you can say, hey, you're doing that. Is that what you want? And then let the person go, gosh, no, that's not what I want. Okay, good. Well, then make a different choice. You know what I mean? Because we do that to our kids, right? When we're training our kids, we go, hey, you're acting in that way. Is that the way you want to act? Or do you want to act a different way? You might have to show a child how to act. You're an adult, so you're showing your child self how to act. Oh gosh, no, this is the way I want to approach that situation. Okay, great. And sometimes a person might need time, so you just go, hey, do you want time out? Time out on this situation right here to go create some space so you can sit with yourself and figure out what it is how you really want to handle this situation. That's how an adult does it. That's how adult people respond to each other. Children respond in a different way, right? They throw temper tantrums and stuff. They're called adult temper tantrums. I've had quite a few in my lifetime. Because people who feel abandonment, they often push people away. That's their number one instinct and response, is to push people away when they feel challenged or vulnerable. So it's easier. And so just if you become pushed away by someone who has an abandonment issue, just give them space. And just let them know, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here when you're ready. And if that takes you a year, then it takes you a year. If it takes you 10 minutes, it takes you 10 minutes. And you get better at it with time, with dealing with your issue. You get better and better at it. At first, it might take you a day, and then it might take you less and less as time goes on. So just if you feel pushed away, just don't let it trigger your abandonment issue, because your natural response is going to be to push away too. So you're going to say, they pushed me away, I'm going to push them away. No, you just say, hey, like literally it sounds like a text that sounds like this. Like if my husband and I were arguing, both have abandonment issues, and his got triggered and I was about to get triggered, then I would, if I couldn't talk to him at that moment, I would text and say, hey, when you're ready. A lot of times text, though, you need to do it through voice because they can't hear emotion through text. So it would sound like I would voice record myself saying like, hey, I understand that you're going through that right now. Just know that I'm here whenever you're ready. I'm not angry or anything like that. I'm just ready when you're ready to work through this issue. I mean, that's how adults respond, right? Stay calm during your conversations. When a person a person who feels abandoned will try to provoke you into a response. They will try to test their theory out on you that everyone rejects them, that everybody leaves them, that everybody doesn't care about them. So sometimes, especially logical people, if they get angry, they will want to fight. So just stay calm and say, okay, this isn't going anywhere. So I'm going to not leave you. I'm going to be here, but I'm going to create space so that you have some space, right, to deal with what you need to deal with. And I'll be here. So just let me know when you're ready. And it's really kind of sometimes difficult to do that when you feel emotionally triggered, like when you feel emotionally attacked. But you really got to go into the observing mode and just say, I don't have to respond in the way that you on the same side. I don't have to respond in that same way. I can just go, hey, I'm going to go create some space. But I'm not leaving. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm not ever leaving, right? Which is one of the things that you need to say, not that you need to constantly say it or anything, but it is something that needs to be said. Like, I understand that you're angry. I'm going to give you some space to be angry. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. So let me know when you're ready to talk again. Go blow off some steam. Whatever you need to do. And that's the way you should actually say it, the way that I said it. I mean, there's no anger. I'm totally separated from the emotion. And I just go, let me know. So avoid pushing someone for answers. Ooh, I tend to have a problem with this sometimes when I get in that fighting mode. It's like, no, I want it. No, I'm not done. No, I'm not done. I turn around. No, we're not done. So I've had to work on this for myself because I would probe and push for answers. You don't need to know the answers because a lot of times when you're fighting, you're not going to get the good answer anyway. You're going to get some random arbitrary answer just to get you to shut up and leave, right? So don't push for answers. Allow the person to open up at their own time. Like I said, create space and let them know I'm creating space for you. Right? And reply honestly. Let them know, hold them accountable, that their behaviors do affect others. And you can say it literally, like if somebody's yelling at you, and I hear this a lot from people, and they're like, my spouse is just like, they want me to fight. And you have to reply as if you're me replying. I have no emotional connection to your spouse. I don't care. Like, if they were yelling at me and I don't even know them, I'm going to be like, look, you got some stuff going on, right? No judgment on this side of the table. I get it. I go through stuff too. And I'm going to give you some space. And I'm not angry, right? I'm just like, hey, I'm going to give you some space. Your behavior is really not going to help this situation right now. And so I'm going to give you some time to work on that. Just like you would with a child. If my child came at me yelling and screaming at me, the way I would respond is like, whoa, I see that you're angry. And this is not the time to have a conversation with your mom. Go deal with your stuff. Come back when you feel a little bit more calm, and maybe we'll be able to come to a better agreement about whatever it is you're so mad about. That's literally the way that you can deal with that. But let them know, like, your behavior, the way that it's happening right now. And in the beginning, when my husband and I, and sometimes still when my husband and I fight, we do fight, not often, but we do. And sometimes my husband will be like, this is the way you really want to respond to this? And when I'm pissed, I'm like, yeah. He's saying that. I'm like, well, not really. Like, he'll knock me out of my senses by saying something like that. All right. So this is the last part of it. Thank you for staying with me for so long. It is like forever long, right? I've been on for a while. All right, how do you know that you've healed? Well, the determination of your advancement with this issue is proven by your reaction to the similar situation. If you come upon a situation that you normally would flip out on and you don't, you're doing pretty good. So examine the situation, and what you will often find is that repetition of the same pattern gets you the same outcome. And I just said that before. You got the fork in the road. I went all the way into what that looks like. So unless you consciously change your belief system, it's your responsibility to make this change. Changing a habit or belief system is not easy, but if you desire it to be done, then there's hope for you that you can change. We are malleable. It's so funny. I was talking to my psychologist, and I was telling her about, I felt like I just damaged my kids for something. You know what I mean? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the most horrible parent. I think I damaged my children. First of all, parents who actually damage their children, they never have that kind of conversation with someone. It never sounds like, oh my gosh, I think I damaged my children. It's like a narcissist never says, oh my gosh, I think I'm narcissistic. So anybody who has that type of accountability, you really aren't damaging your children, but okay. And so my psychologist said, oh my gosh, we have this thought pattern that if we do something that it's going to like ruin the child's whole life, but that's just not how it is. Everybody learns at every age. I'm learning right now, like what, if I can learn right now, then how come I can't think that my 10-year-old daughter can heal or learn something new? Like, of course she can. She can learn something new in her 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm going to be learning stuff new at 90 and 100. Yes, I will be living that long, so. So, and in great shape, by the way, because I'm starting today. Like, I don't play. Anyway, just on a tangent real quick, I used to take care of patients in the emergency room. And older people that came in, and they looked like their bodies looked like they were in their 20s. And I was like, how do you do? I would ask old people. I saw a lot of old people in my day. And I'd be like, your skin is beautiful. What do you do? And then they would tell me their secrets, right? And the same thing, I'd be like their face or their skin or whatever. And I remember I would see like, it just kind of made me think, oh my gosh, if I take care of my body, then I could have elasticity in my skin for a really long time. I just have to take care of myself. And same thing with you. Sorry about the tangent, but that's really important. I did learn that in my life experience, so I'll share it with you. All right. So the abandonment lesson is over when it no longer triggers you in the same way that it did in the past. And that can happen. It's almost like, you know how you walk by people at like the mall or something and you have like no emotional attachment to them. That's what it would feel like if somebody came at you with their abandonment issue. You would go, oh, that's interesting. It wouldn't be like, yeah, well, I got an abandonment issue too, and here's mine. Right? You need to change your perception and you need to change your belief system. So instead of feeling like, oh, I got attacked because my dad left me, or my dad abandoned me, my mom abandoned me, my stepdad abandoned me, all my sisters and brothers abandoned me, my boyfriends abandoned me, this is like, I could live my life in that way. And I have lived my life in that way. And it is dark and it is ugly and I choose not to do it. But I can also look at it this way and say, without those people playing out those parts for me, I wouldn't know what love is today. And sometimes we have to experience the lack of love in order to create the love that we desire. It's like when I was learning to be a teacher, I was put with other teachers in my learning experience that did things that I would not do as a teacher. And I remember like observing them and being like, and I'll remember not to do that. And when I'm a teacher, I'm not going to do that, and it made me a really good teacher. I became teacher of the year because I was able to have like that experience of I would watch things and be like, no, I'm not going to do that. Right. Same thing. And I say one day when I have love, it's going to look like this. This is what love looks like. And because I had lack of love in so many different areas, I was able to say, this is what I want. So abandonment teaches us that we do not need the opinions, acceptance, or validations of anyone outside of our own wisdom. It shows us how powerful it is to be rejected from others. And initially we may fall into patterns that will try to stop that pain. But it really does teach us about rejection of others and ourselves. And so the last bit of healing, and the last part of this, and I'm ready to go lay down, I'm getting really tired, but the last part of this is understanding that you will never abandon yourself again. I didn't even talk about that, but abandonment is abandonment of self. Once you have been abandoned, as many times as I had been abandoned in my life, by the time I was going into adulthood, I had already abandoned myself. I had abandoned my experiences. I didn't want to be that person. It was too painful. It was too hurtful. I decided that I was going to be something else, and I completely abandoned my childhood experience. And so going back in and reviewing my childhood and validating what happened to me, not in like, oh, I'm such a victim, but saying like that is an experience, and I learned a lot from that experience. I have created an amount of self-love that and trust that I know that I will never abandon myself again, because abandonment starts with self, and that's why self-love is so important. When dealing with abandonment, you're really learning how to love yourself again. Once you know how to love yourself, you can be loved by everyone. So the adult has the capability to take care of him or herself. You can rely on yourself, and you can save yourself. No one will ever have the power to abandon you ever again unless you give them the power to do so. Unless you give part of your self-love away in order to give them the opportunity to do it. And it doesn't matter what life experience you come across. You get to choose how you're going to view that. God forbid anything would ever happen in my relationship or my relationship with my children or anything like that that would trigger that abandonment issue. I always have the ability to say, let's say death of a loved one. I always have the ability to say that I can always connect with you in spirit. That you can be here with me always, and that they can give me signs, and our relationship can grow stronger even after you pass than maybe it can here. There's a level of healing that happens in the death experience. So just very interesting. You don't have to look at it like, oh my gosh, that person died and I'll never see them again. But you can feel them again. And I've had multiple experiences, and I'm sure that you have too, where you have felt your loved ones. And just knowing that means that although they have passed, your relationship may have changed, but it has never left. The energy may have changed, and the physical body may be gone. But I didn't even talk about the abandonment of my twin, right? That died. So it's like, yeah, abandonment in all these areas. But I'm just saying, like, you can still have that connection. Like, my dad has passed, and I've had many people in my life who I love very much who have passed, but I can always call on that energy and call on them and say, and tell them how much I love them. So just because that happens doesn't mean that you're abandoned. You can just say it has transformed in a different way. It's just different now. That's all. And I say that now because that's not happening to me right now. And hopefully, it's inevitable. That transformation does happen at some time. But I guess what I'm just saying is just the way you look at it. If one of the ways you can look at something is I can look at my relationship with my father, my real dad, who birthed me, my birth father, and I could say, if you didn't abandon me, then I would have never met my stepdad, who loved me very much. Although he wasn't allowed to show it for other reasons, that I wouldn't have met him, and I wouldn't have met like my other sister, and I wouldn't have had those experiences. And honestly, and no fault, I don't judge my dad at all, but he was never in a very financially stable place where my stepfather was, and he was a very hard worker. He created the things I needed for my logical love, which was stability and security. So you gotta kind of look at it as your life wouldn't be what it is today if you didn't have those experiences. So I know this is really long, and those people who need it will watch the whole thing, and those people who don't, or can't, that's fine. It never hurts my feelings if you do something like that. That's okay. And okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for commenting, guys. I love you so much, and I will see you next time I do a live.